Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Green Room for DisrupTV. And of course, we're here joined by my awesome co-host, Vala Afshar, co-founder, and of course, Chief Digital Evangelist at Salesforce, our producer, Elle, and some amazing guests. So let's do some introductions as we often do in reverse order. Andrés, Tapia, tell us where you're coming in from, and Michel Buffet, where are you coming in from?
Yeah, I'm calling in from a suburb outside of Chicago called Highland Park.
Oh, Highland Park. I know exactly where that is.
Yeah, I'm actually an elected official here, in addition to my corporate job.
Hey, I'll tell you, I'm actually on the Cupertino City Council, so we'll talk more.
Well, Michel, some notes. Yes, great, cool.
Michel, come on.
I originally from France, moved to the U.S. about 30 years ago, and now I live in Princeton, New Jersey.
Ah, very cool. Welcome, welcome. And of course, you're talking about your book, The Disciplines. All right, Patrick, what are you coming in talking about?
So I'm Canadian. I live in San Francisco, but I'm in Midtown Manhattan for the last Tuesday launch of my book, Apple in China, The Capture of the World's Greatest Company.
God, ultimate SEO in the book title. Sweet. All you needed to add was like one more name, like the president and Taylor Swift, and you would have actually had it all. No, just kidding. Welcome to the show. Happy to have you. A lot of good conversation. Karthik, where are you coming in from? What are we talking about?
I'm coming from Mountain View, California. I live in Silicon Valley. And I'm going to talk about the technology vision that we launched earlier this year, our 25th tech vision from Accenture.
25 years of tech vision, Vala. Isn't that incredible?
Incredible.
Incredible. All right, with that, we're going to turn it back to you, Elle, and for the kickoff.
All right, 3, 2, 1.
Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us on DisrupTV. My name is Vala Afshar. I'm the Chief Evangelist at Salesforce and your co-host for the next hour. We welcome you to follow us on X at DisrupTV Show, and we'll do our best to answer your questions live. It's my pleasure to introduce my co-host, Ray Wang. He's the CEO, founder of Constellation Research. He is the best-selling author of Everybody Wants to Rule the World. I don't know. I see Ray on TV every day. Fox Business, Bloomberg, CNBC. In my humble opinion, he's one of the top futurists to follow on X at RWANG0. Welcome, Mr. Wang, to DisrupTV.
Hey, thanks a lot. I'm here with Wang Vala Afshar, the Chief Digital Evangelist for Salesforce. He's also the author of multiple books, including Boundless. And if you haven't read that, it's a new mindset for unlimited business success and a #1 seller on Amazon. But executives around the world pay attention to every one of his inspirational, insightful tweets, and that may be how you know him. But when he's not hosting, keynoting, or leading events at Salesforce, you can find him on business TV outlets such as Bloomberg and writing insightful analyses on ZDNet. Oh, wait, that way. So anyways, yeah, it's not about us, but it's on our amazing guests. And we are on episode 399. We've got 4 more new guests.
It's a pleasure for us to have Karthik Narain, who's Accenture's Global Chief Executive of Technology and Chief Technology Officer and a member of company's Global Management Committee. Karthik oversees all aspects of Accenture's technology business and leads company's technology strategy. Additionally, Karthik is chair of the board of Avanti, Accenture's joint venture with Microsoft. Karthik's role spans cloud, data, and AI enterprise and industry technologies and security, as well as technology ecosystem partnerships. Accenture is our best and biggest partner at Salesforce. Prior to his appointment as Group Chief Executive and CTO, Karthik served as the lead for Accenture's Cloud First and company's data and AI business. Since that formation of the Cloud First in 2020, cloud has become the top growth driver for Accenture. Most recently, Karthik helped define Accenture's approach and establish an early lead in generative AI through investments in its Centers for Advanced AI, new ecosystem partnerships, and new data and AI strategy for the company. Welcome, Karthik, to DisrupTV.
Thank you. Thanks for having me here. And I'm already feeling the energy. And this is the first time somebody read my profile, and it really feels like an important job for the first time.
I had to cut your bio in half because we only have 20 minutes. So thank you for all you do, including all the advocacy for women leadership at Accenture and the work that you do beyond just being a technology visionary. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, we're really excited to have you here. And of course, this is the 25th year of the Tech Vision. Can you imagine that? It started in 2000, Vala. This is crazy. And this year, I think the theme was AI, a declaration of autonomy. Is trust the limit of AI's limitless possibilities? So give us the high level TLDR of what is in the study, what should executives be thinking about, and how leaders should be preparing for all this?
Yeah, first of all, it's exciting, and also it's humbling to be writing about where technology is going every year, and doing this for 25 years is hard and exciting, and a lot of credit goes to my predecessor, Paul Doherty, who many of you know, who was running this for a long time. And this was the first year that I did the Tech Vision after taking over this job. But the idea is, for 25 years, we come up with broad-based themes of where technology is going and what we see as the major movements over the next few years to come. And that's the idea of it. And we've been pretty much directionally right. In the trajectory and some of the things that we call out in this. But the things changed 3 or 4 years ago when ChatGPT hit, where we're seeing technology trends getting appended every 3 months. And this year's Tech Vision and the theme, we believe, is going to be very foundational for years to come. And that is all about the role of AI and how it's going to impact societies, and how it's going to play a role between individuals, enterprises, and government. And we believe that this is going to kind of take to the next level what we saw from some digital technologies that happened late 2000s, say 2008 plus, where we used to call digital technologies as the SMAC stack, social, mobile, analytics, cloud. And when that happened, we actually saw the IT sector in the US growing 109% over the next 10 years, whereas the GDP grew 39%. Overall, across the world, there was 3x growth rate of technology or IT services over GDP. And I think all of that is going to be taken to the next level with AI.
It's I write weekly for ZDNet, and every year since the last 10 years, my most popular article for that year is coverage of your vision report, because there's courage and boldness in your reports. In 2013, when I think you coined the term digital business as a revolutionary trend, there was a lot of controversy at that time. Digital business, and now this year you got AI as new digital. And when you write this report, it makes news. Wall Street Journal recently featured Accenture with the title "AI Agents Learn to Collaborate." So now you're talking about harmonization and orchestration, choreography of machines in business. Yet another, I'm sure, controversial topic, which will be proven right very quickly. You do have an incredible, accurate track record. Can you talk a little bit about what it takes to lead these big, bold, and very accurate futuristic report, and how does AI compare to digital? Because again, I think you're going to get scrutinized, rightfully so, because it's a big, bold, exciting, and uncomfortable topic when we talk about AI. I just want to be a fly in the room when you and your team come up with these amazing research.
Yeah, it's a great way that you put what we did with every business is a digital business. There was a lot of lashback saying, not everything is digital, define digital, and so on and so forth. And to come up with some of these vision, I strongly believe that, there's a little bit of instinct that you need to have about the future, all backed up by the data and experience that you see from the past. And one interesting data point is that if you look at the market cap of all the digitally born companies today, less than 1% of those companies' market cap got created in the first 2 years post the launch of Netscape Navigator as the browser. If you think about Netscape as the gateway to the internet, 2 years after that, the total market cap of today, 1% got created in the first 2 years. So for 18 months, people can be, going through this grind and scrutiny saying, what are you talking about? Gateway to knowledge, gateway to internet, and gateway to prosperity. 1% is a tiny number. So I still believe that we are in that 1% phase since the launch of ChatGPT. And our own estimate believes that 10.3 trillion of economic value will get created. Net economic value due to AI will get created over the next 15 years. And this could go further depending on the adoption diffusion rate and the rate of progress. If you look at it last 3 years, while there has been a lot of progress, most of the progress, grossly speaking, 80-20 rule is that it has not been an algorithmic progress, it's a scaling law progress. All of this is based on the transformer algorithm, broadly speaking, but it's the scaling laws is what is giving every new thing, whether it's the MCP, open source models, the multimodal models, or the reasoning models, and so on and so forth. So if there is another trajectory, another flywheel of algorithmic progress that happens, this could take it to the next level. And basically, we believe that organizations are going to become more and more intelligent and more connected. And we call this concept that an organization, when they bring their enterprise data curated for AI to use, people have been dabbling with data for a long time, but all of that data curation is for human consumption, which is BI and reporting. But how do you prepare data for AI? Then the various models that could use the data in various different ways and take those models and the insights that comes from models, put it to action through agents and put guardrails in it. All of this, if you bring all of this together, we call that concept that an enterprise will create as a cognitive digital brain of an enterprise, which is constantly learning. Like our brain, we have some data, we have some insights, we take some actions, and we have some boundaries of what is right and what is wrong. Okay, so if you apply that to an enterprise, we believe that that cognitive digital brain will get created, and over time, you will have a personalized digital brain for every employee, a digital brain for an enterprise, and a digital brain at an industry level, and a digital brain at a country or government level. And when these start talking, we believe that is the declaration of autonomy. It's the new world that we will be living in. And we believe that the only thing that's going to be a limiting or an accelerant is going to be trust. And it's trust and autonomy go hand in hand. That's the theme of the vision.
That was your research report is very in depth, but that cognitive brain part was my favorite part of it. You talked about knowledge, you talked about models, you talked about agents, you talked about architecture. You had like 4 pillars that made the cognitive brain. And I suspect that cognitive brain is perhaps the inspiration for the AI refinery trusted agent huddle, this consortium of top companies building agentic AI, including my company, and frontier AI companies. And Accenture seems to be this gravitational pull of bringing the best and brightest companies around a framework that can make all of this magic come to life. And so that every company of every size in every industry in every geography can have their cognitive brain. I highly recommend folks who are watching, read the Tech Vision report and spend some time on the cognitive brain part, because that's what's going to unlock this incredible autonomous future you speak of. Sorry, Ray, I had to kind of jump in because that was my favorite part of the report. Go ahead, Ray.
No, and actually, along with that, that's one of the things that we discovered. Like, we believe that intelligence is actually doubling every 7 months, and so like more where capacity of memory would double every 2 years on the transistor. We think every 7 months. So in literally like 7 months, you have a doubling. In like 42 months, it's 64x. In 70 months, you're going to have 1,000x of that level of intelligence, which is why the LLMs are actually operating that quickly. And basically, you're going to have to adjust and adapt for that, especially if you've got digital brains proliferating across every entity. And that digital brain is really some of that great conversation. But let's really jump into the trends. Let's take 4 of these trends. Like the first one, binary Big Bang. When AI expands exponentially, systems are upended. What does that mean? Give a short synopsis. Oh, Karthik, yeah. So for the AI Big Bang, what does that mean for you?
Sorry, I don't know whether it's for me. The question,
Yes,
it broke up a little bit, Ray.
No problem.
Is it me or?
Yeah, Karthik, we're asking you,
Okay.
there's 4 trends, binary Big Bang, trend 2, your face in the future, trend 3, when LMs get their bodies, and trend 4, the new learning loop. Let's start with binary Big Bang. What is that about?
It's a great question. Before I go into the binary Big Bang, the important concept I also want to cover is a double click about this trust concept. And I said that there's a very direct correlation between trust and autonomy. And the reason why I say that is, imagine, like everybody, all of us have seen, whether as children or as parents, we've seen our kids or ourselves learning to ride a bike. And there is an aspect of emotional, trust that we need to have, whether the kid will be able to do it or, does the kid need support, and also some amount of cognitive trust that is needed about their own ability to handle riding the bike on their own. And only when both of that are met, would we allow our kid to ride the bike on their own, or when we are riding our own bikes, we will have the confidence to take our hands and enjoy riding the bike in a different way. So the similar way, we believe that organizations need to inject trust in the system for AI to be able to be used. And it's a long journey, and it's a repetitive journey. It's a combination of confidence, our own intuition, explainability of when it does take a decision, why did it take a decision, and so on and so forth. And that's kind of what translates into these 4 trends. And the binary Big Bang, being a technologist, is my favorite. And the image, that the reason why we named it is, it's almost like, in my mind, it's this explosion of unlimited potential that is going to be possible. Is going to be possible because of what is happening of large language models breaking the barrier in technology and coding. And what we believe is going to happen, and Salesforce is one of the first ones to embrace that, where we believe that because of this cognitive digital brain that's almost going to carry the DNA of an enterprise, we believe that there is going to be a DNA footprint captured in this digital brain, and you will be able to customize and personalize experiences within your enterprise. And that is how Agent Force was born. That is how everybody else is creating their own versions of customizable technology. We believe that suddenly your ability to operate with technology through natural language, your ability to create new code and technologies using code completion and code creation, and the ability to operate your enterprise through these automated coding assistants and control planes is going to upend all technologies and create a new architecture where your systems of transactions, your systems of insights, and systems of actions, all of these can come together to drive new experiences and increase the digitization index of enterprises to a greater degree. Today, despite all the things that is happening in IT, organizations, only 50% or less of the processes are fully digitized. The rest have manual handling. We believe that this is going to take the world to a next new level of end-to-end digitization because of the binary Big Bang.
I love that. And my last question to you, Karthik, in the Accenture report, you talked about the future, technology, and you talked about abundance, you talked about abstraction and autonomy. And a lot about autonomous businesses, self-driving businesses, obviously the combination of predictive, generative, physical, and agentic AI will create that level of autonomy. And then you talk about trust. And in the report, you explicitly said the importance of trust may be the most important limiting factor for businesses to achieve autonomy. Now, Accenture is masterful. I mean, $4 billion of AI projects in terms of gaining autonomous capabilities, which some people talk about cognitive transfer, where now we have intelligent software doing the work for us. But when I think of trust and what I think makes Accenture special, unique, is not about cognitive transfer, but cognitive upgrade, because you're committed to getting 80 to 100,000 of your employees to become data and AI proficient. And I believe it was a 2-year goal, and my guess is you've probably already surpassed those numbers. But the fact you're investing in upgrading your talent to ensure that they can gain trust with your clients, 750,000 person companies, so you have incredible worldwide clients. Talk to me about how much commitment Accenture has and your team is driving to investing in the human part of this equation so that we can gain trust with these emerging, exciting, and somewhat scary technologies.
Yeah, it's a great question, and like you rightly said, the human play a very, very important role in everything that's going to happen in AI, and especially agentic. There is all this conversation of gloom and doom that, okay, AI agents is going to completely replace what humans are going to be doing, and what will the humans then do? There's a lot of question there. And if you look at the whole idea of this trusted agent huddle platform that we created as part of AI Refinery, is the fact that there needs to be collaboration that needs to happen between multiple departments of an organization and between departments of two different organizations. And when that happens, the humans play a very, very important role. When you reimagine a workflow or a process using AI agents, the human comes first. You start that with what is the role of a human in this, which means that what is the accountability aspect in that process workflow? What requires a human to approve? What requires a human to arbitrate? What requires a human to decide what is the next course of action? Once you do that, and secondly, you will also have to determine what are the things where a human is better than an AI agent. Converse to all the conversations happening outside, there are some incredibly hard things for humans that AI can do easily, but there are some incredibly simple things for humans that AI struggle with. So you also need to determine where the human ingenuity solves for the process or the workflow or the task in a better way, and put human in the center. And everything else is done by the agents. So you will have a way where the agents are able to do a lot more for that human. And for that, it's both upgrading the humans to be able to think in a novel way with unlimited resources around them. And it's for the agents to complement the humans on their effort to be able to do that. And that is why we are upgrading our talent. We created our platform AI Refinery, as well as this trusted agent huddle. And the trusted agent huddle is not just a communication protocol. It is basically a trust protocol. So Karthik, how do you do that? And we are creating novel ways in which you can inject trust in how the agents communicate and what the agents did. And also this transparency in how we are able to do an audit or be compliant on whether the agents did what they are supposed to do in their job. That's how we are thinking about this holistically.
You're leading the world in this. In this space, you're leading the world.
We're going to see amazing amount of automation and AI going forward. And you're definitely right. When and where you insert a human is really going to be the most important question we ask in that process and decision tree. Karthik, we've got to go. We could talk to you for hours. We're with Karthik Narain, Group Chief Executive, Technology and CTO at Accenture. Hope to catch up with you sometime soon as well in the Bay Area. Thank you for being on the show. We never have enough time for the Tech Vision. We're going to have to make sure we do this like double issue.
I don't know. I think 500,000 people work for Karthik at Accenture. No, I mean, I'm serious. Yeah, like all the time. Yeah. So anyway, we have amazing authors come on our show, and our next guest is no exception. Patrick McGee, congratulations on new book. Author of Apple in China, The Capture of the World's Greatest Company. Investigative journalist Patrick draws on 200 plus interviews with former Apple executives and engineers to reveal how Cupertino's choice to anchor its supply chain in China has increasingly made it vulnerable to regime whims. Both an insider's historical account and cautionary tale, Apple in China is the first history of Apple to go beyond the biographies of its top executives and set iPhone's global domination within an increasingly fraught geopolitical context. A journalist with Financial Times from 2013, Patrick has reported from Hong Kong, Germany, and California. He's led FT's Apple coverage from 2019 to 2023, and now his incredible new book. Welcome, Patrick, to DisrupTV.
Thanks so much. My pleasure.
We're super excited to have you here. And as you can imagine, the backdrop of what's going on with US-China relationships, the backdrop of really what's going on in this great power war that's happening. And there are a couple companies that are in the middle of that conversation, whether it's Tesla, whether it's Apple, and you decide to take on the conversation which you know best. So why did you write this book, and why now?
Well, why now? I can't take credit for the spectacular timing. I mean, the book literally hit the printers within 48 hours of Trump announcing Liberation Day, effectively taking the country into economic warfare with every nation on the planet, even those islands inhabited by penguins. So I'm not sure I can take credit for that. I will say that as people cover the AI race nonstop over the last 2 years, I was absolutely delighted, because when you take a year off to write a book, what you're really hoping for is that your biggest rivals, there's a lot of smart journalists covering Apple, you're really hoping that they don't decide to write a major magazine expose of it. And so, the timing was spectacular in frankly many ways. Why I wrote it was just that I sort of, I was covering Apple for the Financial Times, and I really got intrigued by how they make their products, in part because I discovered something called a manufacturing design engineer who had really never been written about. So if you think of Apple, everyone knows the top of the pyramid in a product cycle. That's Johnny Ive and the Industrial Design Studio. They design the look and feel of what a product will be. So think of like a chrome back and a all white iPod. Below them is product design. They make sure you can actually cram the battery and all the microelectronics into what Johnny Ive has dictated, essentially. Manufacturing design is the next step in the pyramid, okay? This is before you scale the operations. And MD are the people that are flying by the plane load to China to train hundreds of factories, train, audit, supervise, do whatever they need to do, co-invent. They don't just make the parts, they build the processes and the software behind the processes to build those parts in massive quantities and at Apple's unparalleled quality. Well, guess what happens when you do that? You accidentally build up an enormous electronic sector in China where the suppliers have nothing to do with the skill, but supply all the Chinese handset makers. So the rise of Huawei, Oppo, Vivo, etc., these companies that have 55% global market share are where they are today because Apple trained all of their suppliers. That struck me as an amazing story to tell. I took 2 years off basically to write it, and it hit stores 2 days ago.
Amazing.
Wow.
Yeah, and that's why you're in New York, your book tour.
Correct. Yes.
That's great. So give us some historical perspective. What was attractive about China 25 years ago?
Not much. Abundant labor, very cheap costs, and tailor-made policies to basically turn a city like Shenzhen from a series of fishing villages into the 10 million plus city it is today. There was no tech competence. I mean, really, these were people that, this is the first it's called the post-80s generation, right? The first people to live in China after Mao who have the flexibility to go from the hinterlands to cities like Shenzhen. And Shenzhen is not at all representative of the country, certainly not back then, right? This is an experiment in capitalism. And so they're luring in capital, and they are there building entire factories and the time it would take us to get through some of the environmental paperwork. So they're just providing a lot, but what they have is sort of, let's say, a determined work ethic. And, you know, this is China coming off their humiliation, their century of humiliation. There's sort of like a Nietzschean will to power across the country and in the culture that they want to reclaim their place as the middle kingdom. Nobody quite discovers just what is possible like Apple. I mean, just to give one anecdote, the motto of Tim Cook going into negotiations was be aggressive and unreasonable. And I spell out, like, what does that mean? Because people at Apple didn't really know what that meant. And Tim Cook's point was, you don't know what a supplier is capable of. So don't go into the negotiation and sort of have a sense of what they're already capable of doing. Ask for the moon and see if they can do it. And so Apple really trains up these suppliers in remarkable ways. And, you know, my joke is like, what's your favorite Dell computer from the early 2000s? Right? There's nothing like that. But Johnny Ive and his perfectionist, no tolerance for defects culture cascades not just across Apple, not just across California. It is sent over by the plane load into China, and it really builds up that whole sector. So the story is a corporate history, but boy, oh boy, does it get geopolitical real quick.
Patrick, I went through 8 PCs in 1 year because the quality was so bad. And I know exactly what you're talking about. But there's a little bit more here, and I'm just going to dive just a little deeper with you.
A lot more here.
Flextronics. I mean, these were Taiwanese suppliers lured into China, being told that they could actually come back and, you know, we could prosper together. And then with a flick of a switch, when we went from Jiang Zemin to Xi, everything changed. So if we were still on the Jiang Zemin path, would we still be in this level of peril? Or do you think this was what it was meant to be?
It's a fantastic question, and obviously you can only speculate. So what I would say is that I think too much of the scholarship coming out now is saying, like, there was never any chance that China was going to become a democracy, was going to build up small L liberal values and so forth. I think that actually very well could have been a possibility. And in a sense, what happened were the unpredictable events in the 2000s, namely September 11th, which, you know, basically brought war in Afghanistan and Iraq, and the financial crisis. Why do I bring those up? Because American policymakers were not focusing on what we now call the China shock, right? They were not considering trade. They were focused on the Middle East. They were focused on the financial crisis. They were focused on mortgages. It just wasn't what we were thinking about. And so, you know, there's actually very little reporting until about 2006. I mean, I might even say no reporting until 2006 of how iPods and other Apple products are made in China. And what happens is the Daily Mail, you know, sort of a UK tabloid, like, you don't really, it's not the Guardian, or it's not, you know, I don't know, something really.
It's some good reading.
Not the New Yorker or anything. Yeah, still good reading. But I'm saying it's surprising that this is who does it. They do like the first investigative deep dive into Foxconn factories making the iPod. And although it's a really good report, okay, so credit to the reporters who did it, to me, it sets into motion this cat and mouse pattern where the way you cover Apple in China is you go to the factories, or you find a human rights group that goes to the factories, you shame Apple for people working 16-hour days or whatever, having underage workers. Apple basically does its own audit, it apologizes, it pledges to improve, and basically Apple plays the role of white knight, saving the factory conditions, and the journalist wins an award for their coverage. Okay, great. What are we totally missing? Why is Apple in China? What is China offering? What is the strategy? How does it work with what Johnny Ive is doing? I mean, I just think we've completely missed the biggest tech story in the last 25 years. And that story is that Apple inadvertently had a Marshall Plan-like influence on China.
The IP transfer was ridiculous. I mean, it's the level of adoption and the IP transfer. You're exactly right there. In ways we would never have imagined, especially in the microelectronics industry. Sorry, Vala, go ahead. So.
Patrick, when we read your next book a couple of years from now, titled Apple in India, what's going to be the big reveal?
Honestly, has very much crossed my mind. I would love to write a magazine article. The penultimate chapter, okay, before TSMC chapter is about India, and I would love to write that book. It probably would be. It would probably have to be 2030 or after. I don't think things
because you want to immerse yourself there for a year or two. Like what?
I'd go live in India. I love India. I'm not all that optimistic that India can pull this off. So for starters, that's why it's not a 2027 book. It's going to take time. Supply chains aren't the quickest moving things. And really, this isn't a knock against India. Nobody can compete with China in terms of how quickly you put things up. And not only that, nobody would want to compete with China. We wouldn't want to replicate the philosophy they have of, teenage girls leaving their homes and working 12-hour days in a factory job. And, if they have children, having their children being raised by their grandparents in a village where they're not allowed to, because they're not allowed to bring their residency with them. So there's a whole different cultural thing here. So what people don't get is they always think, okay, but why don't we do iPhone production somewhere else? Because they think it's a matter of willpower and cost. So what do you do if that's the situation? You change the incentives, you put tariffs on the country, etc. It's not willpower and cost. It's dynamism of the population, density of the population. It's just things that we cannot replicate, and India won't be able to replicate. There was a study of 80 countries of how much internal migration there is, and India came in dead last, which is not a deficit or anything, but it is not a culture of people going from one part of the country to another. China does that, not only historically, but I mean you've got this floating population, tens of millions of people that go from one factory to another for seasonal work. You don't have that in India. So short of a total breakthrough with automation or something, it's just not going to happen.
So is it more likely, you think, that the dark factories will end up building all these iPads and iPods and devices in the US versus having the human labor component?
I would say I'm bullish on lights out factory is the term I use, but just so the audience is following, this is a factory where it's called lights out because it's all run by robots and they don't need eyes to see. So, unless it's someone managing something, they can run 24/7. I'm bullish on them, but it's going to happen in China, not in the US, because even in that scenario where you don't have anybody working in the factory and therefore it's not about labor costs and therefore China doesn't have an advantage, China is doing so many other things. I mean, think of all the companies that are going to Africa, the Chinese companies, and they're doing all the mining. Where's all the refining of that metal, of the metal and other minerals going? It's all happening in China. We do not do rare earth refinery in America. We do not do big lithium mines in refinery in America. China does all of this stuff. And, we've made some dumb decisions for good reasons, right? Like environmental movement is something I'm perennially pissed off about. I'm an environmentalist. It's really important. However, if you say no mining in my backyard, you essentially take a NIMBY position for our entire country. It's not like the mining doesn't get done. It gets done in a worse place with poor labor conditions and no regulations sometimes, right? And when we're not getting the job benefit. So we have to stop being so damn parochial about these issues because we're just tying our hands. So I sort of think, parts of my books really tie in with a new book from Ezra Klein and Derek Thompson called Abundance, right? We are our own worst enemy with why we can't build anything.
So why doesn't Beijing go after Apple? I mean,
great question. Why would you go after Apple? Apple is providing, by Tim Cook's estimate, 3 million jobs a year. And it's not just as paying them, it's not obviously it's through its suppliers, but it's training them. I mean, the manufacturing design engineers would tell me we give the Ivy League equivalent of hardware engineering training, right? Sometimes you hear that China has great vocational schools. Apple is the vocational school. And so if you're Xi Jinping, why would you do anything about this? The only concern is that it moves to India. So Beijing won't let that happen. But you're not going to, cut off Apple. I mean, you need their manufacturing help. You want the exports that contribute to your GDP, but you want all the lessons from literally America's best engineers. Think of who Apple hires, going over by the plane load and teaching your workforce. It's brilliant.
You say that when China overtakes U.S. Economy, China's economy overtakes U.S., some people will view it as a big mystery, a whodunit, and something that needs to be solved. Why do you say that?
Yeah, I quote somebody near the end of the book saying, basically treating Shenzhen like a crime scene and saying there's Apple DNA everywhere, right? The rise of China's electronics sector has one massive corporate supporter, Apple, So Apple's part of an organization that views Made in China 2025 as a anti-Western hook or by crook aggressive strategy. Well, Apple, its biggest member, is the biggest supporter of Made in China 2025. It was inadvertent. It sleptwalked into this position, but the numbers are absolutely staggering of how many people they've trained and how much investment they've thrown into the country.
It is amazing. I mean, you're chronicling something that happened in almost every industry. Apple was the most extreme example of what happened in terms of IP transfer, IP theft, the supplier network that evolved inadvertently, and really the rise to China's manufacturing capacity. I mean, we're talking about 5x manufacturing capacity to the rest of the world. We're talking about 2 cents a kilowatt hour on power to be able to do the manufacturing at. And you're also looking at an industrial policy that is designed for world domination, unlike any other country and any kind of willpower. So it's a very fascinating book into what's happening. And as Vala said, what's next? What's next for you? What are you thinking about here?
Just to sort of riff off what your comments there, because you're offering a perfect assessment of, in a sense, what the book is. Like, I think more of us need to be conversant in the importance of supply chains, the fragility of supply chains. We need to be more conversant in Chinese history, in the Chinese-US tech battle, etc. But if I said, Ray, Vali, guess what? I've got a great new book on supply chain. You wouldn't have me on the show. Why would you? People's eyes glaze over, right? Right? That's if
no, it's you. We would have you on the show because it's you.
Supply chain in China, nobody would read it. I wouldn't even got a book deal. So I'm sort of giving you a Trojan horse of a book. You're going to learn about all the things we just said, but you won't even realize it because all I'm doing is telling sexy stories about the world's most iconic company.
You know, thank you so much for being here, and congratulations. It's on the way. You're in bestseller status, dude. Congratulations.
Cheers.
All right, take care. Dude, it's a fascinating read. That's all I can tell you. I mean, if you just think about what's happened to the US over the last 20, 30 years, it's all in there. So it's a must read for every single CEO out there.
5 years ago, I read Kai-Fu Lee's book, US versus China AI Race, the dominance and the distinction between the two countries. And yeah, this is going to be a narrative that will be a mystery to some, but not to all. Our next two authors,
and they're not mysteries.
Yes, no. The 5 disciplines is not an enigma. This is a real, and we all should learn. Andrés Tapia and Michel Buffet, co-authors of 5 disciplines of inclusive teams, unlocking collective power to achieve breakthroughs. Andrés recently retired from Korn Ferry. Congratulations, after serving there for 12 plus years as a senior partner in global culture, transformation, and change strategist. Maybe we'll get breaking news on our show, what he's going to do next. Maybe not. I know our audience want to know. He's got over 25 years of consulting experience with Fortune 500 companies, organizations, non-US multinationals, Brazil, South Korea, India, across Latin America. He's also author of Inclusion Paradox and Authentico, the definitive guide to Latino career success. Michel Buffet is a senior client partner and top team performance solutions lead at Korn Ferry. He's got 25 years of experience advising C-suite leaders on organizational and leadership development. He serves on the board of the French-American Chamber of Commerce in New York. Welcome, both Andrés and Michel, to DisrupTV, and congratulations on your new book.
Yeah, great to be here, Vala and Ray.
Thank you. Yeah.
Well, we're really excited you're here, and when you think about what is next, right? We're probably, and I think I hear Vala say this all the time too. I mean, we could be the last generation of managers to manage only humans. And so this level of inclusivity in terms of building inclusive teams, it's going to be important in terms of mission and purpose. So Andrés, tell us about the overview of the 5 disciplines. Give us that top level.
Yeah, well, we set out to crack the code about a correlation that has been well documented, that more diverse teams managed inclusively lead to greater innovation and greater productivity. But it kind of happened organically. We wanted to see if we can figure out that some sort of social dynamic algorithm so that we can then accelerate the process, make it more predictable and more scalable. And the other phenomenon that we observed is the CEOs in the vanguard were realizing that the top-down organizational model was going to kill them if they didn't let go of it. And they had to move decision-making to the middle of the organization. And who sits in the middle of the organization? It's teams, right? And now with AI and digital scalable platforms, they can actually now demand and expect their teams to make better decisions on the fly and more quickly to keep up with the rate of change.
I've had the privilege of leading diverse teams, and diversity, in my experience, has been a competitive advantage, something that in my career I've deliberately looked for. Now, maybe because I'm an immigrant refugee, and so I've had life experiences where people invited me kindly to their tribe and gave me safe space to share my points of view. And so it was maybe it's just something that's ingrained in me. Now, recently, DEI has been a kind of contentious, definitely issue in recent weeks. How does your work relate to it, and how does it differ? And Michel, maybe we can have you start.
Of course. So I think one of the things I like to say is that yes, it is an interesting time to publish a book that has the word inclusive in it. But I'll say something is that, we've known for a very long time the importance of inclusion. It's been in the last maybe 10, 15 years that D&I has really kind of emerged as this really big practice, and it certainly led to some amazing work. But the awareness that inclusion is a critical aspect of high performance teams, that dates way before that, right? We know from the research, early 40s, 50s, there's tons of research that shows that teams that know how to leverage kind of the full experience background of its members tend to achieve better, particularly in spaces on tasks that are related to innovation. And I think just the example you gave about yourself, sort of like the disclosure that you just made, the link that you made between your formative experiences and then the work that you're doing as a team leader, as a team member, that's the kind of things that we're trying to help organizations do more intentionally, more explicitly, because we believe, and we not only we believe, but we've witnessed the impact of that kind of disclosure. Even just this week, right? So I lead top team performance for Korn Ferry. I spend probably 70% of my time in that space. So I spend a lot of time with teams. And just this week, sort of a 3-day offsite with a team, we started the offsite with an exercise of disclosure, exactly like what you just did, Vala. So it's having all members on the team tell everybody else the story about where they come from, what shaped them, what shaped their perspectives. And right there, you start to see connections, awareness that team members didn't have about each other. Say, oh, I didn't know you brought that. Oh, I didn't know you had that experience in your background. And now new connections can happen. And all of this in service of the team's purpose.
Yeah, and it doesn't leave you. When I immigrated to the U.S. from Iran, you've got burning U.S. flag, you've got the hostage crisis, you've got a country that went backwards, in my opinion, hundreds of years due to the regime change, and yet people welcome you with open arms. So it's not just sense of belonging, but sense of mattering when you feel authentic generosity and kindness. So it just shapes you in terms of who you are. And I don't think if you go through that process, you could ever deviate from the power of inclusivity and the fact that it brings joy to an individual. And I don't know how you can reach your full potential unless you're passionate and joyful about what you do. So, to me, it's a mystery how people can debate the power of this topic. And
I wanted to make a connection to something that, it's fascinating to hear your two speakers before us, because the connections are so obvious. The whole point around trust, right? So if we know that we are at a existential juncture here with machines and with artificial intelligence, where we know trust is going to be critical to drive the right decisions. And, I just sort of penned an article about how AI is reshaping the work of top teams. That's central to the discussion. You now have leaders at the top organizations who have to make existential decisions. It's not just about their companies. This has implications for humanity of how you bring AI into the value chain. How do you do this? Well, you need to have trust. You need to have a set of leaders who are coming in, making decisions, not to be self-serving, not to be their own interest, but on behalf of the best interest, not only their organizations, but I think, the market, the consumer, the clients. So I think it's a big shift. It's a big realization here that I think is coming in. I'm glad that our book is coming out at this time.
It sets the stage actually for the first two disciplines, connecting to build affiliation and caring to nurture psychological safety, right? That in a world that has become very digital and with more artificial intelligence and fast pacing, the human element, the HR element and the human heart part of it becomes that much more imperative, right? To be able to bring the humanity of who we are to the accelerated, innovation that AI makes possible. And so much of the focus on innovation keeping up, and actually the reliance on AI could actually take us away from the human connection that becomes even more vital than ever before. So when we work with executive teams and teams at every level of the organization, it's don't just rush over to talent optimization and process innovation without having gotten the foundations that are as human as who are you? What do you bring to the table? What is the inventory of skills, experiences, and accreditation that you bring to the table that may not be evident in your title, right? That if I don't know that when we're in the midst of it all, I will not be able to understand where is it that, Vala Ray said what they did, unless I knew that you had a refugee experience, right? Unless I knew X, Y, or Z. Yeah. And that's what we need to open that up. And that slowing down at the beginning for a team formation is what really accelerate, give velocity when you're now running down the field of keeping up with the speed of change.
Can I just one last thing, because I'm thinking about inclusivity in a world where you have digital labor. A year ago, when I went to San Francisco, I would see Waymos driving around, and people literally would stop on the sidewalk and take pictures. Just in this notion of a car going, a retrofitted Jaguar going down the streets, like pictures. I spent a week in San Francisco this week. No pictures. We have now invited self-driving cars, autonomous cars, no driver, and it's not normal. Like, I'm looking around saying, no one's taking pictures anymore. It took less than a year where it's no longer novelty. Citizens of San Francisco accept the inclusion of machines driving around busy streets. And now I think about the enterprise and business, fast forward a year from now, when agentic AI means a good portion of your population, especially in large enterprise, will be digital labor. And the mindset you need, the level of trust you need, where you're going to transfer or have a cognitive download of your daily work to a piece of software. And what does it, does the H in human resource stay? It's not human anymore. It's machines and humans. What is that function called? Is it talent resources? So just the impact is mind-numbing. And I'm seeing it when I watch Waymos driving around. By the way, that population is going to be Zoox from Amazon and robotaxis from Tesla. A few months from now in San Francisco, you're going to be just hundreds of cars driving with no driver. And I just think the mindset you need to be able to welcome that level.
And in fact, in the book, we actually refer to, we got to look at AI as a member of the team that has to be included and included in an interactive, generative way, as opposed to just some tool over here, right? Because AI is the result of HI. And AI will augment HI, right? And it's in that interaction, not only the individual to the AI, but the collective team to the AI and back. That's where the power is, and that's where these disciplines really come to life.
Well, Andrés, that's that power sharing, and Michel, that power sharing is actually going to happen between humans and agents, right? You talk to a whole chapter on power sharing, and some of these key strategies to ensure contributions from a team that everyone feels valued and important. The good news is the agentic AI is not going to care too much about their emotional state, about whether they're included or not included, right? They're going to be looking for meritocracy. They're like, who's got the better algorithm? They don't care what you look like, what's going on. They're like, forget this DEI stuff. We're a program for optimization. How do we rectify that? Because if you look at it, almost every Fortune 500 company has dropped their DEI program. But we know that there's a certain amount of pendulum swing going here, in terms of what is that right balance between meritocracy, DEI, and a world of agentic AI.
Yeah. we have decades of Hollywood telling us stories about robots coming in and making decisions. And so I think that's kind of what we are.
What could go wrong? What could go wrong?
There's a real paradigm shift. Listen, and I like to use the example of Mickey Mouse in Fantasia with the brooms doing the work. Like, are we going to have a wizard that's coming in and just stopping the madness? So I don't know, but I think there's a real question around, so how AI is seen as, is this kind of an agent? Is this complementing the work of humans? Is it replacing it? And it is really a big shift. And I think the real question we have to ask ourselves is the question of purpose, right? And intent. AI, there's no consciousness there. There isn't judgment. There isn't like a value judgment. And so, what is the valuability of this? And I think that's just to bring it back to kind of the inclusive leadership is knowing what to do with AI, with an AI agent, while at the same time being clear about what defines our humanity. And I think the connecting and caring that Andrés mentioned, that's why in our graphic, we're putting it around the other disciplines, because we feel these are the cornerstones of inclusive inclusive teams. That you need to set the conditions for team members to connect in a meaningful way and care about each other.
Yeah, and I would add that, while AI can be the meritocracy, perfect thing, it isn't, because AI has learned unconscious bias from us. And here's where the HI-AI interaction happens. Just quick anecdote, I look for epigrams for our book, and, and then we tell AI, hey, give me epigrams, by comedians, right? Just to have something funny there. And then sure enough, I get 10 epigrams by 10 comedians. And then the HI has to back away and say, what's wrong with this picture, if there's anything? And they all are white, male, American comedians. So then I had to say, no, I had to prompt it again. I said, look, these are all white male comedians. There's funny people in other parts of the world with other races and genders. Give me that. And then it goes back, and then it panders to me, and it only gives me people of color, right? and a 10. And I said, no, just give me a diverse world where I have white and black. And, so I had to interact with it, right? And that's just a small example of multiple things we've had to do to get to the best collaboration that is truly inclusive, because AI will default to some biases unless we watch it. And one more thing, though, now I do the HI part, but then I go back to AI and says, hey, where is the unconscious bias or even the explicit bias in what you get back to me? And AI will go, good point, right? And then it will actually catch itself, right? So we have to be in that critical mindset of really seeing it as a team player and work with them in an inclusive way.
It's amazing the level of conversations you need to have in order to refine your input prompt, and it differs by language models. And I'm not going to name names, but there's a particular very popular language model where if I end my input prompt and respond knowing your answer has my job has a dependency on the quality of your answer, I explicitly say my job's on the line, I get a much more refined, much more accurate answer. And it's not coincidental. I've done this multiple times. So it's funny. Some of the language models do want to please you, but you could actually inject a sense of urgency in the level of research it does with its output prompt. It's mind-numbing. Cool to see the variances. But
urgency and ethics, right? There's urgency and ethics, because now what you just did is that you increase the level of responsibility and accountability. So now you have.
I literally say my job depends on it, and I found a magical phrase, and I compared the two answers from when I don't say it and I say it, and it's night and day. Anyway, little tidbit. In your book, you talk about hybrid. Now, hybrid has dimensionality to it. It's not just working from home or office. Hybrid is now humans and machines. And it looks like, and it's fair to say, I think we'll all agree, the worst AI we use is today's AI. So whatever biases, whatever shortcomings, a year from now when you're back on the show, we're going to recognize, all of us, that the velocity of innovation, speed and direction in terms of improvement is unlike anything I've experienced in 30 years covering tech. So be patient, it's going to get better. But having said all of that, what trends would you like to share with us in terms of how you build teams, how you create a culture that embraces inclusivity, and what should we expect in terms of work and our leaders in the next few years?
I'd love to share just maybe something around, because we wrote the book. It came out in March, but we kind of finished writing it last summer. Well, as you can imagine, since last summer, a lot of things have happened, and so our thinking is continued to evolve. I think maybe one of the things I'd like to share before Andrés kind of contributes his idea as well is for us to be very mindful. So we have these 5 disciplines, but I think there's a realization that the task matters as well. You have to look at what is the work of the team. And so there are different implications if you are looking at a team that is really about perform. So at Korn Ferry, we have an enterprise leadership model that distinguishes between perform and transform. And so for a team to perform, which is to optimize performance in the short term, there's a certain set of practices that are really critical. And we know, like, for example, that, you can, that's where it can, because the task can be coordinated in a certain way, there isn't as much of an emphasis on being, for example, together in a physical space. You can have more remote work, you can be more hybrid, because it's really more about coordination, right, and synchronization. But if you're really looking at transform, if you're looking at bringing a team together to imagine the future, that's where I think we see a limitation in the hybrid or the remote work model. You need to bring people together in a room for a few days, and then things happen, right, because of that. And so I think I want to, for a lot of leaders who are trying to figure out the answer to that question, I think it's really worth thinking about what is the nature of the task, and how does it inform the way that you bring your team together.
Yeah, and that leads us to one of our disciplines, synchronizing to harness collective intelligence. And I think that's the way of the future, right? That things are moving so quickly that, you know, synchronization of team members, whether they're virtual or in person or hybrid, has to happen using every technology available and every human touch ability together. Still, we need live experiences. And if you think about the metaphor, the peloton and the Tour de France, right, how that team moves in synchronicity up and down the hills, the cobblestones, the paved streets, against the wind, and they have to take turns getting in front of the peloton to cut and create the draft. And they're both in competition and in collaboration all at the same time, all at once, as they have a common purpose to win the race as individuals and as a team. And I think synchronicity is really much tied to neuroscience too. We're learning so much about how our brain is in synchronicity with itself, and we can activate more parts of the brain all at once to create more innovation. And that the electrical currents within our individual brains now affect the electrical currents in other people's brains to create collective synchronicity. So we get entrainment and flow, you know, and now add artificial intelligence, and then that bati-bato back and forth between AI and HI is a form of synchronicity. And now it courses through the entire team members so that we can generate that higher end of thinking and activation and impact.
What a great analogy, because that Tour de France, you took a class of work that's asynchronous, you know, where you have very little dependency, you're a single contributor and no one's waiting for your output as their input. And then you have synchronous work. But in that example, you gave what I would typically think asynchronous activity in cyclists, you know, one individual, one champion, like tennis, like golf. But you added an element to it that makes it like synchronous, like basketball, football, baseball. Great analogy. That was a great. Everything is borrowed. I'm going to borrow that.
Wow, you hit flow, you hit autonomous. I think Vala is very happy. So, anyways, we are here talking about connecting, caring, synchronizing cultural dexterity, and of course, power sharing with Andrés, Tapia, Michel, co-authors of the 5 disciplines of inclusive teams, unlocking collective power to achieve breakthrough. Thanks a lot. And of course, catch the book on Amazon.
Yeah.
Terrific.
Thank you for having us on. Thank you.
Oh man, crazy. I mean, think about the number of topics and the period of time that we're in.
I'm still replaying Karthik's comments in my head, and Patrick's and Michel and Andrés. I don't know. That sometimes I don't think I'm smart enough to interview 4 people in an hour and fully return all the wisdom nuggets they drop on us. That was awesome. Yeah, maybe you can summarize it for me, Ray. Give me like a 30-second overview of the show, because we could have talked to all 4 for the entire show.
Well, here's the quick summary. When we talk to Karthik, it's really about this age of AI. We are here. We're probably in the first 2 innings of what's about to happen, and there's a lot more ahead of us. Anything from the binary Big Bang to your face in the future, and LMs get bodies in the new learning loop. AI is going to be everywhere like air. And definitely check out the Tech Vision report, one of the hot areas. Patrick jumped in, and I thought what was really important is this is a story I've always wanted to tell, really, of how the US lost its industrial might. I remember when I was talking to Richard Wagner at a conference once, he's like, nah, the Chinese will never catch up building cars. And, you know, he was the CEO and chairman of GM. They'll never catch up to building cars in China. And I looked at the guy and said, you're an idiot. You're such an idiot. You're giving away so much.
No name calling on our show. No name calling.
All right, fine. You're giving away so much knowledge transfer that we're never going to make it up at that scale. You do not understand what you just unleashed. And of course, it's been going on for quite some time. And it's really a good lesson for everybody to understand what's happening. And then, of course, you know, Andrés and Michel are writing against the grain, right? This is a world that has gone anti-DEI, but it hasn't gone away from humanity and mission and purpose. And if you think about those 5 disciplines of inclusive teams, it's going to be even more important in an age of digital labor to be able to actually bring the people that are there together to actually harness that human intelligence. So that's about as good as I can do, but I think Perplexity can do better.
That was better than any of the language models I used to summarize things. So thanks.
But we'll see them in the background in the green room. So if anyone's
next week, you and I hit a milestone, episode 400.
Wow.
400 episodes. That's more than 400 hours of us learning as students with great guests as our teachers. We have Lord Tim Clement Jones of the UK, former chair of the House of Lords Artificial Intelligence Select Committee and the co-chair of the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Artificial Intelligence. So we thought for episode 400, we should have a Lord on our show. we have CEO Denise Holt, founder CEO of AIX Global Media. And we'll talk about inference AI and the latest breakthroughs in terms of creating more efficient, more cost-effective AI outcomes. We have Dr. David Bray, former CIO of FCC, distinguished chair of the Accelerated Stimson Center and principal CEO of LDA Ventures. And we have Melody Wilding, author of Managing Up, How to Get What You Need from People in Charge. And last but not least, one of our favorite journalists and media CEO, John Reed, co-founder of Diginomica. So let's just pack an hour with 5 incredible individuals, including a Lord, for episode 400. So get your popcorn, buckle your seatbelts. It's going to be right. Yeah.
Nothing less.
That's for you and I. We have to somehow orchestrate this conversation.
Maybe we'll get a new video too. Interesting.
Yeah. Oh, that would be nice.
What a weekend project.
I think we're due for a new video. If it's Friday, it's DisrupTV. Thank you for watching. Thank you for making 10 years of doing this a delight for both Ray, Elle, and myself. And we'll see you next Friday. Bye, everyone.
See you next Friday. Bye-bye.